Indonesia's Suharto is a figure often associated with numerous controversies. He has been labeled as oppressive and corrupt. Throughout his tenure, he suppressed political opposition and dissent, facilitated human rights abuses, and enabled the military to exert significant influence over politics and the economy. Suharto's family and close associates faced accusations of rampant corruption, while his government was criticized for its lack of transparency and accountability. Despite these issues, Suharto is also recognized for his role in developing Indonesia's economy. Many Indonesians credit Suharto for fostering stability and economic growth during his extended period of authoritarian rule. They believe that this new order government effectively guided Indonesia through a turbulent era of political unrest, instability, and economic underdevelopment that followed the country's independence from the Netherlands in 1949. Certainly, Suharto's significance becomes apparent when comparing his leadership to that of certain African regimes. From 1967 to 1998, Indonesia's gross domestic product, GDP, a measure used to evaluate an economy's health, grew from approximately 5.6 billion to over 227 billion by 1996. However, after the Asian financial crisis and Suharto's departure, it plunged to a low of $99.5 billion. Despite his reputation as a harsh ruler, Suharto undeniably built Indonesia's economy from scratch. He laid the groundwork for Indonesia's present-day economy, which, as of 2021, amounts to over $1.19 trillion. This is noteworthy when compared to Zimbabwe, an African country with a GDP of $1.4 billion in 1967, which had grown to just under $8.5 billion by 1996. While Indonesia may have already been ahead, the stark contrast in growth compared to African regimes is hard to ignore. Notably, Zimbabwe was under the rule of Robert Mugabe, widely regarded as one of the world's worst dictators. So how exactly did Suharto shape the Indonesian economy? At the core of this transformation were economic policies, the fundamental components of how a government manages a country's development. Suharto implemented a variety of economic strategies, ranging from attracting foreign investments and promoting export-oriented industrialization to building infrastructure and devising monetary and fiscal plans, among other measures. Additionally, his approach to crony capitalism played a significant role, as it enabled select Indonesians, predominantly Chinese Indonesians, to rise from poverty to wealth. Suharto's economic model focused on a more balanced combination of income derived from primary resources and industrial production. Under his leadership, the country demonstrated competent economic management. A comparison between Suharto's and Sukarno's governance styles reveals a stark contrast. Sukarno was heavily influenced by foreign ideas, despite not having received an overseas education himself. He was surrounded by individuals who had, and he had great faith in the power of their ideas. In sharp contrast, a prominent general from the 1945 generation characterized Suharto as, quote, a down-to-earth regional commander with little interest in Western concepts and even less patience for those in his circle who embrace them. Suharto's impact on Indonesia's economy is most evident when looking at how he reversed Sukarno's economic collapse. At the end of Sukarno's reign, the country faced negative growth, 600% inflation, no foreign reserves, and a national debt exceeding $2 billion. Upon assuming power, Suharto and his team implemented various macroeconomic stabilization measures that rescued the nation from economic catastrophe. New policies aimed at revitalizing the economy laid the groundwork for accelerated industrial growth. The foreign trade regime was liberalized, granting better access to essential raw materials and capital goods for the industrial sector. Early indications of the new order's commitment to fostering the private sector were apparent. A new investment law enacted in 1966 was accompanied by import and tax concessions, making Indonesia more appealing to foreign investors. The combination of improved conditions, underutilized capacity, and high domestic demand spurred industrial growth from the early days of the new order's economic management. Additionally, it is essential to recognize the significant impact of rising oil prices in the 1970s on Indonesia's prosperity. Oil was an extremely profitable industry in Indonesia, and the crude oil that the country sold for less than $3 per barrel skyrocketed to over $30 per barrel by 1980. Between 1970 and 1981, oil export revenues increased at a rate of 45.5%. Oil and gas represented 37% of total export revenue in 1970, and by 1981, this proportion had risen to 82%. During this period, the country's GDP growth rate averaged 7 to 8% per year. The role of oil in Indonesia's overall growth not only supported foreign reserve earnings, provided an alternative source of affordable electricity, and reduced reliance on imports and external shocks, but also since the oil sector was predominantly state-controlled. Revenues from oil were then channeled into infrastructure development in the 1970s and 1980s. Furthermore, Japan initiated numerous investment projects in Indonesia, estimated to be worth around $132 million in 1969, further fueling infrastructure spending. Overall, under Suharto's rule from 1967 to 1998, Indonesia experienced significant economic growth and development. This period was marked by improvements in gross domestic product, poverty reduction, agricultural development, foreign direct investment, and infrastructure, as well as efforts to control inflation. To elaborate further into Suharto's economy, let us dive into 5 important indicators. First, let us go into the country's GDP. Suharto's tenure saw a remarkable increase in Indonesia's GDP, which grew from approximately $5.6 billion in 1967 to over $227 billion in 1996. This rapid growth can be attributed to a combination of sound economic policies, a focus on industrialization, and the efficient utilization of the country's vast national resources, including oil and gas. The economic growth during this period helped Indonesia to become one of the largest economies in Southeast Asia. Secondly, Suharto's economic policies and development programs led to a significant reduction in poverty rates. Investments in education, healthcare, and social welfare programs contributed to improving the overall standard of living for many Indonesians. As a result, the percentage of the population living below the poverty line declined, and millions of people were lifted out of poverty. According to USAID data, Indonesia's poverty rate decreased from 50.6% of the population living in poverty to slightly below 11.3% by 1996. Thirdly, during Suharto's rule, Indonesia achieved self-sufficiency in rice production, a major accomplishment given the country's large population and the importance of rice as a staple food. The government implemented policies and programs such as the intensification of rice production and the use of high-yielding rice varieties, which played a vital role in boosting agricultural output. To look further into the data, according to USDA data, Indonesia's agricultural production grew from $15.7 billion in 1967 to over $54 billion by 1996. Thirdly, Suharto's government fostered an attractive environment for foreign investment by implementing business-friendly policies and establishing strong relationships with international organizations like the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and Asian Development Bank. These relationships and the influx of foreign investments contributed to economic growth. Fourthly, Suharto's government invested heavily in the country's infrastructure, including roads, ports, airports, and telecommunication systems. These investments were critical in facilitating economic growth by connecting Indonesia's many islands and remote regions, enabling the efficient transportation of goods and services. Moreover, the improved infrastructure attracted foreign investment, boosted tourism, and supported the growth of various industries across the country. And finally, during Suharto's rule, efforts were made to keep inflation under control, ensuring price stability and boosting investor confidence. The government's monetary and fiscal policies, as well as its prudent management of public finances, contributed to maintaining relatively low inflation rates, which, in turn, supported economic growth and development. It has been observed that during Suharto's reign, Indonesia emerged as a model for third world development. The display of growth, relatively minimal social unrest, and the absence of military presence in the streets were enough to earn accolades in many parts of the world. However, much of our understanding of Suharto's rule is shaped by his development narrative. We have yet to fully examine how financial vulnerability and corruption revealed the hidden issues that his governance brought to Indonesia. Undeniably, the country experienced growth under his leadership, but it also encountered various challenges along the way. When the Asian financial crisis hit, Indonesia's economy collapsed, leading to Suharto's eventual downfall. The Asian financial crisis had a profound impact on Indonesia's economy, causing it to face a multitude of crises. First, the country experienced soaring inflation. Second, its foreign reserves continued to decline. Third, the value of the rupiah plummeted, dropping to 2,600 rupiahs per dollar to over 14,000 rupiahs per dollar. These issues were further exacerbated by Suharto's decision to favor his family and close associates. His choice to grant tax-free status to a high-profile national car project owned by one of his sons eroded the remaining support from key players in the Western establishment. This project was a blatant example of crony capitalism. Moreover, when the regional economic crisis hit Indonesia after August 1997, Suharto began to disregard the advice of the technocrats who had consistently guided the country through economic turmoil and maintained the government's credibility. In retrospect, these mistakes were Suharto's own doing. It wasn't until the sustained student protests that began in February 1998 that an effective opposition movement began pushing him out of power. After all, initial political protests in July 1996 were successfully suppressed, and a wave of violence targeting churches and Chinese-owned properties that same year was carefully extinguished without undermining Suharto's authority. When the time came for him to step down, it was ultimately his own decision. Neither the military nor his closest advisors explicitly told him to resign. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.